Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. I was hit by a car and injured my head. The doctor said I might develop amnesia. Jokingly, I asked who the person sitting by my hospital bed was. He hesitated for a moment and said we were just ordinary friends. I looked at Ethan, who sat by my bed, uttering those 4 words, ordinary friends. His expression was cold and distant, and he didn't seem to be joking. The words, "gotcha," "fooled you," got stuck in my throat, and all I could do was quietly look at him. I thought that if the doctor hadn't called him, he probably wouldn't even have come to the hospital. But I didn't question him. Instead, I paused for a moment, then smiled, pretending it didn't matter. "Really, that's quite the trouble for you." Then he responded with a cold hum, as if I was wasting his time. Glancing at his phone screen, he said, "Since you're awake, I'll go. There's still work at the office." Before I could react, he stood up, ready to leave. When he got to the door, maybe because of some lingering conscience, he turned back and said, "Get some rest." The smile on my face didn't drop until he had left and closed the door, turning into a blank expression. No one knew about my relationship with Ethan. We started dating back in college, and after graduation, we moved to Shanghai together, where we both started working in market planning for one of the city's top companies. We were young back then, but we knew office romances weren't ideal, so we agreed not to mention our relationship to anyone. Years later, we both got promoted to business managers, each leading 2 competing departments. By then, it was even less convenient to make our relationship public, so we kept it a secret all this time. I had hesitated and asked him if we should go public. After all, there were no official company rules against dating. But each time, he brushed it off absent-mindedly. I didn't even know if we still counted as a couple. But today, I finally understood. The doctor had told Ethan that I might have temporary memory loss, but he also said not to worry. I'd recover soon. Yet despite all the logical information, Ethan still told me we were just ordinary friends. He probably wasn't afraid of me confronting him once I remembered. He didn't care if I really had amnesia or if I was joking. He had probably wanted to break up with me for a while now. And why not? How else could he pursue Sophia without guilt? Women's intuition is often sharper than radar. In fact, our relationship had already grown stale. We'd been together for so long, from sophomore year to now, 7 years in total. We knew each other as well as the lines on our own palms, so there was no hiding any changes in him from me. The sign started when a new intern joined his department, a bright, pretty girl named Sophia. The HR who handled her paperwork had once gossiped to me that in the section where she listed her father's name, she wrote Alex, our company's CEO. A wealthy, beautiful daughter of the boss working in her father's department. Ethan explained why he was being so attentive to Sophia. It's better not to offend her. Plus, she's just an AV kid. She's not my type at all. You're overthinking this. I didn't bother pointing out that this SNV kid was 2 years older than me. I accepted his explanation in silence. Later, I wasn't sure if he thought too little of me, or just didn't care to hide anything anymore. About 2 weeks after Sophia joined, I logged into Ethan's old music account, which he hadn't used in a while, looking for background music for a project. That's when I discovered he had followed Sophia there, an account he hadn't touched in years, as work had kept him too busy. That account was from our college days. We used to listen to music together, racking up 13,190 hours of playtime. He even made a playlist named after me, filled with songs that reminded him of me, my favorite artists, songs I had shared on social media, and songs he listened to when we were in a long-distance relationship during breaks. But when I checked, I found he had deleted that playlist. His recent listening history was filled with trendy Korean pop songs, music Sophia liked, not him. We worked in marketing, so I told myself maybe he was just keeping up with the tastes of younger audiences. Maybe I was reading too much into it, so I quietly logged out of his account without saying a word. I'm not the type to make a fuss without solid evidence, after all. The ones who last the longest at the poker table are always the ones who show the least emotion and speak the fewest words. But the coincidences between Ethan and Sophia didn't stop there. In early February, Ethan led his project team on a new assignment. At the time, I was away on a different project with my team in another city. I occasionally heard that his project involved a difficult British client. After a long, hectic day with no time to eat, I called Ethan to ask about his project's progress, but he didn't pick up, likely busy, so I sent him a message that he never replied to. Later, I saw a group photo he posted on social media. Soph was standing next to him, flashing a peace sign with a radiant smile. Their project seemed to be going well. His caption read, "Know your enemy, know yourself." Sophia had posted a similar photo with the caption, "And you'll never lose a battle." When I clicked on her profile, I saw that their WeChat statuses had both been changed to that quote, as if they shared some secret mutual understanding from the project. Ethan's previous WeChat status had been a line from a poem. "Raise your sail toward the stone, reach for the moon in the sea." It was a tribute to my name, Emily. I wondered if he even thought of me when he changed it. Probably not, since he never called back or replied to my message. Yet there he was, commenting under Sophia's post, "Don't forget to eat, take care of your stomach." I rubbed my own rumbling, aching stomach and turned off my phone. That was the second time I let it slide. I was discharged 3 days later. The doctor had observed me and found nothing wrong, so I was allowed to leave. The day I didn't receive a single message from Ethan. However, he did send a bouquet of cappuccino roses, my favorite. Holding them in my arms, I decided to give Ethan one more chance. I sat in the hospital corridor and called him. It took a while for him to pick up. I asked gently, "Ethan, I'm being discharged today. Do you have time to pick me up?" We both tacitly avoided mentioning amnesia or ordinary friends, as if the incident had never happened. He didn't speak at first. After a pause, he said, "Sorry, Emily. I'm really busy and can't get away. Should I call you a cab?" "What are you busy with?" I asked calmly. There was a brief silence on the other end, probably because he was surprised. I'm usually very considerate and rarely ask sharp questions like this. I knew our first project had just wrapped up, and this was our least busy period, yet he claimed to be busy. He didn't reply. I sighed and hung up the phone. It's easy to tell when a man loves you or doesn't. I remember when we had just started working after graduation. One night, I suddenly had a severe stomach ache at 3 a.m. and passed out after calling him. When I woke up, I saw him sitting by my hospital bed, his eyes red. One foot wore a slipper and the other a sneaker. Both shoes were for the left foot. I couldn't help but weakly laugh. He looked terrified, and his eyes turned red instantly. "How can you laugh? When I opened the door and saw you lying on the floor, my heart almost stopped. Next time, call 911 first. What if I hadn't gotten your call? That was so dangerous." I smiled at him, full of trust and dependence. But in my heart, I thought, "You're the safest person." See, he used to care so much about me. We used to have such beautiful, sincere love, even though things are almost unrecognizable now. Thinking about those distant memories still brings a faint, self-deprecating smile to my face. I shook my head and tossed the cappuccino roses into the trash bin beside me. "Do you not like those flowers?" someone asked behind me. I turned around to see a stranger. He pointed at the flowers in the trash and apologized. "I'm sorry, my car accidentally hit you yesterday. I brought you to the hospital and contacted your emergency contact, but I had to leave for an urgent matter. These are discharge flowers, and I've already paid for your hospital bill. I apologize again. If you need anything else, feel free to let me know." I was dumbfounded. So even the flowers were from someone else. I looked up, politely apologizing. Sorry, I thought they were from someone else. I sighed inwardly. I've always been a reasonable and well-mannered person, but being well-mannered doesn't mean I'm weak or easily bullied. Ethan and I had truly come to an end. When I returned home from the hospital, Ethan was already there. I opened the door and walked in. He was sitting on the couch, the TV playing a show he had no interest in, while he was engrossed in his phone, chatting with someone, a faint smile on his lips. The dim light from the phone screen softly illuminated him. His face gave him an oddly gentle look. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen such a warm smile on his face. I stood at the door, but he was too absorbed to notice I had come in. It wasn't until I softly called his name, Ethan, that he looked up quickly, hiding the smile on his face. My gaze fell on his hands. Instinctively, he locked his phone and flipped it over on the couch, looking at me in surprise. "You've been discharged?" he asked. That's when I finally smiled at him and at myself. I looked at him calmly and spoke softly but distantly. "Let's talk." Our breakup was, you could say, peaceful. We're both calm people, so it didn't take long. We're mature adults who value appearances, and once everything is laid out in the open, there's really not much to discuss. It was a mutual understanding, unspoken but clear. When I said, "Let's break up," he didn't ask why. He just remained silent. I think in that moment he felt a sense of relief. After a while, he finally said, "I'm sorry." I didn't accept his apology. Instead, I calmly organized the details of our breakup. My tone was steady, my expression hardly sorrowful, which surprised Ethan. When I suggested he move out as soon as possible, he suddenly interrupted me and asked, "Emily, you don't seem sad at all." His brows furrowed slightly as he focused on my face, scrutinizing it with confusion. Men are such funny creatures. Even if they no longer love you, even if breaking up is exactly what they've been hoping for, they can't bear to see you so composed. Perhaps in his mind, I should have been crying, begging him to stay, and only then would he feel some sense of triumph amidst his boredom. I looked up at him, my gaze emotionless. I didn't tell him that I had already been sad when he ignored my texts, but commented on Sophia's social media post immediately after she posted it. When he deleted the playlist he'd made for me, only to listen to the trendy Korean songs that Sophia liked. When he looked at me, pretending to have amnesia, and said we were just ordinary friends, when behind my back he and Sophia were caught up in that ambiguous push-pull dynamic that only adults engage in. I had already been sad. Ethan, to me, was like a benign tumor growing inside my body. It wasn't deadly, but if left untreated, it would slowly turn malignant, consuming my health and vitality bit by bit. There's nothing to fear. You just need to cut it out at the root while it's still benign. The pain is only temporary, but eventually I will recover. Before Ethan finished packing and left, I calmly asked him one last question. "Ethan, did you fall out of love because Sophia is Alex's daughter, or simply because she is who she is?" He stood by the doorway and looked back, tall and handsome as he had been when I first met him in college. His face, once youthful, had now matured, revealing a quiet, composed demeanor. I had always thought he was still the shy boy who had blushed while awkwardly confessing his feelings to me on the track. It wasn't until that moment that I realized he had long since become someone who weighed the pros and cons in the deep waters of self-interest. After a pause, he finally said, "Emily, people always want to move upward." His words made me chuckle, but I respected his partial honesty. I looked at him and genuinely smiled, saying, "Ethan, I wish you great success soaring high and far, and may you get everything you desire." His gaze lingered on my face, and deep within his eyes, there was a trace of regret. But compared to his ambitious desires, that regret seemed insignificant. Finally, he sighed and said, "Emily, don't hate me." I didn't respond. One downside of office romances is that after the breakup, it's hard to part ways without awkwardness, especially when you still have to work together. No matter what happens, work goes on. When the taxi pulled up in front of the office, I saw Ethan and Sophia. They weren't alone. Their team was with them. It was lunchtime, and they were probably heading to eat. Sophia looked lively, her face glowing with a charming smile, gesturing animatedly as she spoke to Ethan. Ethan, smiling softly, watched her with a gentle gaze, occasionally looking around to ensure she wasn't about to bump into someone, pulling her aside when she almost did. It felt both familiar and unfamiliar. After the breakup, he seemed quite happy. I stayed in the car watching them disappear into a nearby Hong Kong-style cafe, then finally looked away. The taxi driver glanced at me with curiosity and asked, "Do you have a crush on that tall, handsome guy?" I laughed and explained, "That's my ex-boyfriend." The driver's expression quickly changed from curiosity to awkwardness, as if he wanted to offer some words of comfort, but didn't know how. I reassured him, "It's okay, it hasn't affected me." When I entered the office, Bella was excited to see me. She greeted me, "Emily, you're back. You didn't let us visit you in the hospital." I smiled as we walked. "It wasn't serious, and look, I'm fine now. How's the review of the Hong Kong project coming along?" She handed me a stack of printed documents and followed me into my office. After glancing around to make sure no one was nearby, she leaned in and said quietly, "Emily, don't look at the data just yet. There's something I need to tell you." I put down the papers and looked at her. Her expression was a bit indignant as she said, "Emily, did you know that Albert is leaving to take charge of the Nanning branch next month? Everyone's saying that the open director position will be between you and Ethan. Both of you have performed equally well over the years. Honestly, we'd be happy with either of you getting it based on merit alone." But she hesitated, biting her lower lip as if she was struggling to say something difficult. I smiled gently. "It's okay. It's just the two of us here. Go ahead and say it." She hesitated for a moment longer, before finally saying quietly, "A few days ago, I saw Ethan and that Sophia from his department hugging in the break room. It's no secret in the company that Sophia is rumored to be. The boss, Alex's daughter, that's why Bella seemed so upset, likely thinking that Ethan's success wouldn't be entirely fair." I rolled the edge of the papers in my hand and suddenly wanted to laugh. While I had been sitting in the hospital, staring at my phone and wondering why I hadn't heard from Ethan, he had been enjoying someone else's embrace, but it wasn't unexpected. I smiled self-deprecatingly and reassured Bella, "It's fine. Promotions and transfers are up to management. We just need to focus on doing our jobs and let things unfold naturally." Bella sighed, and I lowered my head to continue looking at the data. I was genuinely surprised when Ethan knocked on my office door later that day. In my mind, although we had parted amicably and without a fight, that only meant I was a person who maintained dignity. It didn't mean that Ethan and I could still have casual conversations and act like normal colleagues. I thought we would avoid unnecessary interaction whenever possible. That was until I learned why he came to see me. Standing tall in front of my desk, his gaze unreadable, he finally spoke. "Emily, I thought you would resign." His tone was a mix of advice and warning. "We've been together for 7 years. Don't say I'm heartless, but with Albert leaving for Nanning next month, one of us will take his place as director. If I were you, I'd make plans early and find another opportunity." I looked at him, understanding his meaning. He was certain he would get the promotion, and this was his way of telling me to leave. Otherwise, once he became director with the boss's daughter as his girlfriend, he'd probably pressure me to resign to avoid gossip. His advice was his kind way of telling me to get out while I still could. I could accept a man's change of heart because, in the end, love isn't something that can be tested. But I never expected him to abandon every last bit of his humanity. I looked at him like I was seeing a stranger, and in his gaze, I uttered my first curse word. "Ethan, you're a real piece of trash." He accepted it in silence. My first face-to-face encounter with Sophia came a week after this conversation with Ethan. After our breakup, Ethan, who had always said office romances are bad and refused to go public, was now openly together with Sophia. I saw their affectionate moments on social media. Our co-workers flooded the posts with congratulations, while only the friends Ethan and I had shared in college messaged me in shock, asking what had happened. I didn't reply to any of them. The day Sophia approached me was a very ordinary afternoon. Most of the office was either out for lunch or napping at their desks. I was alone in the break room, grinding coffee beans, and the rich aroma slowly filled the air when Sophia appeared behind me. I stepped aside to make way for her, but she didn't walk past. Instead, she stood in front of me, looking at me with an oddly meaningful expression, before abruptly saying, "I know you and Ethan used to date." She had a baby face and was shorter. Then me, I looked down at her, calmly raising an eyebrow as if to ask her to clarify. She looked up at me, her eyes scanning my face. Not getting the reaction she was hoping for, she looked a little disappointed. After a pause, she continued, "I saw his playlist named after you and Sailing in the Moonlight. Your secret relationship wasn't exactly well hidden." I stayed silent, patiently waiting for her to finish. She said, "My dad really likes Ethan. You know, Ethan is young and promising, mature, driven, and ambitious. My dad says Ethan reminds him of his younger self. My dad wants to groom him, and Ethan's future is limitless. Coincidentally, I really like him, and he likes me too. We're together now, but Emily, your presence is quite an eyesore. I hope you'll be sensible and resign." Only then did I realize why she had come, first to intimidate me, then to warn me, and finally to gently persuade me to step aside. I held my cup, my expression calm, and my tone steady, even carrying a slight smile. I looked down at her and said, "Miss Sophia, any personnel changes for employees must follow formal procedures. I'm not sure if you're here to try to fire me or for something else. If it's about firing me, the company has clear regulations. Please have HR speak with me and explain the reason for my termination." Her face turned pale, probably not expecting that I wouldn't back down. Before leaving, I added, "Oh, by the way, any personnel changes for managers and above require the chairman's personal approval. In other words, in this company, the only one who can fire me is the chairman. Miss Sophia, you're just an intern in Ethan's department. You might be overstepping a bit." With that, I left her standing there as I walked out, still holding my coffee. Not long after my conversation with Sophia, Albert's transfer to Nanjing was officially announced. Before he left, the chairman hosted a farewell banquet for him. All the company's senior management were present, the heads of each department. We all knew that besides bidding farewell to Albert, there would be changes to the core departments at headquarters. When the HR manager placed the invitation on my desk, only Bella seemed visibly upset. She had been trained by me personally. Slumping over her desk, she first cheered me on, then solemnly added, "Emily, no matter what happens, our team has your back. If things don't work out here, we'll follow you wherever you go." I smiled, lightly tapping her forehead with the invitation, and said gently, "What are you talking about? It's just a meal. Have you forgotten my life motto? Build a bridge when you come to water, carve a path when you hit a mountain. What's there to be afraid of? Besides, I won't be the one to lose." On the day of the banquet, I was calm. In the private room, the heads of the marketing, management, HR, finance, and business departments were all gathered together. Chairman Alex sat at the head of the table, with Sophia to his left and Ethan next to her. When everyone saw Sophia, they exchanged subtle glances. Previously, it had only been a rumor, but now that she, in turn, was seated next to Alex, it confirmed the truth. However, since Alex didn't introduce her, everyone pretended not to know and avoided bringing it up. I sat properly next to Elle from finance, eating, drinking, and conversing when necessary, staying silent when it was appropriate. No one discussed work that evening. The banquet's focus was Albert, his contributions to the company, and best wishes for his success in Nanjing. It wasn't until the meal was nearly over and the pleasantries exchanged that Alex put down his chopsticks and brought up the real reason for the gathering. At just over 50, Alex was well maintained, appearing energetic and sharp, more like someone in his 40s. His keen eyes swept the room before he wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, "Besides sending Albert off, there's something else I'd like to address." I put down my chopsticks and looked up at him. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Ethan, who had a faint smile on his face. The young poised professional he and Sophia, smiling beside him, made quite the pair. I withdrew my gaze and lowered my eyes, calmly picking up the towel next to me and slowly wiping my hands. Alex's voice was deep and steady. "As you all know, I have only one daughter. When she first graduated, I arranged for her to work at the company. My daughter has a strong personality and didn't want people to know who she was. She wanted to work her way up from the bottom. She's done quite well over the years. I've heard many of you praise her, and that makes me very proud. Now that the time is right, and with Albert heading to Nanjing, I think it's time to formally introduce her to you." His gaze calmly landed on me, filled with pride and a warm smile. He extended his hand toward me and said in a gentle tone, "Emily, come here to your dad. It's time for everyone to meet you." I calmly put down my napkin and smiled. In the dead silence that followed, the only sound was Ethan knocking over his glass of water. I turned towards the sound. His expression was still relatively calm while smiling apologetically. He wiped the table with a napkin in a steady, unhurried manner, showing no signs of embarrassment. Then he looked up at me, his face slightly pale, but I couldn't read the emotions deep in his eyes. I averted my gaze, not even glancing at him. Out of the corner of my eye, I simply stood up and, under the stunned gazes of everyone, walked toward the head of the table, gently resting my hand on the back of a pale-faced Sophia's chair. I said politely and softly, "Miss Sophia, could you please move?" I heard someone sharply inhale in surprise. The dinner ended quickly, after its intended purpose was fulfilled. I could already imagine the waves this evening would cause in the company, but what intrigued me more was Ethan. He had once told me, "Emily, people always aim to climb higher." I wondered if he was now on his way up that path. I didn't turn to look at him, not even a glance. The day Sophia came over to greet my father before leaving, I heard his restrained and low voice. "President Alex, Miss Emily, we take our leave now." I didn't say a word, but my father's sharp, scrutinizing eyes lingered on Ethan's face and then briefly on Sophia beside him, before he smiled warmly. "All right, take care." Once everyone had left the room, the smile slowly faded from his face. He looked at me and asked, "What's going on between you and Ethan?" Yes, I had mentioned Ethan to him right after graduation. I hadn't told him we were dating, but with his experience, he probably figured it out. I smiled, meeting Alex's scrutinizing gaze, and coldly said, "Didn't you see? He was stolen by Sophia. Her mother is an expert at coming between relationships, so it's only natural her daughter would follow suit." I paused, then emphasized each word, saying, "Dad." The last time I called Alex Dad was when I was 7. Back then, he had just divorced my mother. I was standing at the villa's gate, tugging at his sleeve repeatedly, asking, Dad, why is Mum divorcing you? Say something." He didn't respond. As a child, I didn't understand. It wasn't until I got older that I realized the complexity between adults. My dad and Sophia's mom were childhood sweethearts. Sophia's mom had looked down on my dad for being poor and married someone else. Later, my dad married my mom, who supported him as he built his career from the ground up. After they became successful, Sophia's mom showed up again, divorced with Sophia in tow. At that time, Alex was still young and couldn't let go of his grudge against his childhood sweetheart for choosing wealth over him. The more he resented it, the harder it was for him to forget. My mum, however, never spoke ill of the past, always maintaining my dad's dignity in front of me. She was a graceful and dignified woman. After being betrayed, she divorced decisively. Even after the divorce, Alex never remarried Sophia's mum. He just supported her, mocking and ridiculing her for not recognizing his potential back then. Sophia's real name wasn't even Sophia. She changed it when she was 8, likely to please Alex. She and her mother were proud and complacent, unaware that I knew all about them. I learned about it when I was 8. I had secretly returned to the villa behind my mother's back and saw Alex celebrating Sophia's birthday. He held the 10-year-old Sophia in his arms, with her mother standing next to him, all 3 of them smiling as if they were the real family. Since then, I had never called Alex Dad again, and we rarely saw each other. Ethan only knew that my parents were divorced, that I had taken my mother's last name, and that I changed my name to Emily. After I graduated, Alex invited me to work for his company, saying, "All these years, I've only had one child, and that's you. Doesn't your mom understand you're my flesh and blood? Who else should inherit what your mom and I built if not you? That aunt of yours has been trying to get her daughter into the company to learn, but I've blocked every attempt. Emily, your dad knows what he's doing." My mum is a proud and high-minded woman. After the divorce, she didn't take a penny more than what was rightfully hers. But I'm not like her. Why should I give up what's mine? The more uncomfortable something makes others, the happier it makes me. So after graduating, I joined the company with Ethan, starting from the bottom of the core business department and working my way up bit by bit. Alex knew Ethan, then kept an eye on him, and praised him for his talent and potential, all because I had mentioned him in front of Alex before. The family dynamics were complex, and I had planned to explain everything to Ethan when Alex eventually made things public. But Ethan surprised me first. Alex looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a weary, tired expression on his face. He sighed and said, "It's my fault. I failed you." I chuckled. That's just a man's nature. I suddenly thought of what Sophia had said in the break room when she came to confront me. She had mentioned that Alex once said Ethan reminded him of his younger self. They are quite similar, both cold and ruthless, quick to betray when convenient, and neither has much taste. I returned to the company 3 days later, giving everyone plenty of time to process the shocking news. When I came back, everyone acted normal, treating me the same as before. They crowded around to ask questions. They just smiled a little more warmly than usual. All seasoned professionals, they knew just how to strike the right balance. That actually made me feel relieved, and I acted just as I always had. Only Bella was upset, scolding me for worrying her so much, only to find out I had been playing a long game all along. I eventually won her over with a seafood feast. As she cracked open a lobster claw, she asked, "So you're the real Eyes? What about that Sophia?" I didn't hide the truth from her. I briefly explained the situation, and she looked shocked. "Oh my God, there are people that shameless in the world pretending to be the boss's daughter to scam everyone. That's disgusting. Emily, while you were away, a lot of people have been gossiping. Can I tell them what's really going on? I can't stand seeing Sophia strut around like she owns the place. If it were true, fine, but it's just a cat pretending to be a tiger's cub. I don't know what she's so smug about." I handed her a piece of lobster meat, smiling casually as I said, "It's no secret. If people ask, feel free to tell them." I didn't underestimate Bella's ability to stir things up. By the end of the afternoon, the whole company knew Sophia's real background. When I went to the finance department for project approval and budgeting, I saw Sophia standing in front of Elle's desk, frowning, pointing at the reimbursement form. I asked Sophia, "Why are you trying to reimburse the bag you bought through the company's accounts? If this approval doesn't go through, I suggest you carefully review and double-check the reimbursement items as well. You can't reimburse everything that's personal as if it's a company expense. Sophia's expression shifted awkwardly in response to Lati's words. She picked up the reimbursement form from the desk and shot me a furious glare before leaving, as if I had orchestrated this situation. I didn't say a word. Ever since Alex publicly acknowledged my identity, I began to get involved in all aspects of the company. This would give me a clearer understanding of the company's macro development. Of course, Ethan hadn't been promoted to director yet. For now, Albert was still managing things from Nanjing. After I left the finance department, my manager's position became vacant. Bella still needed to hone her skills, so they brought in a business manager from another large company to fill my previous role. Once the personnel changes were confirmed, colleagues I was familiar with sent me messages or texts congratulating me, except for 2 people. I'm not sure if it was guilt or something else, but ever since I returned to the company, Ethan and Sophia had been avoiding me. In fact, there was no need for it. My energy was limited, and I was busy getting to grips with various company matters, leaving me no time to focus on them. Besides, bridges are bridges and roads are roads. They're simply not on the same path as me. But perhaps they didn't see it that way. Sophia approached me first in the same empty break room with the same coffee beans, but her expression had transformed from arrogance and superiority to anger. She stood behind me and spat, "Hypocrite!" I ignored her. She continued, "Your mum used to act like she didn't care about anything, just walked away saying she wanted nothing to do with us. I thought you both really didn't care about the Hawthorne family's assets. I didn't expect such hypocrisy, pretending to be so pure and indifferent while secretly trying to claw your way back. If you really thought you were noble and didn't care, you should have gone far away. Such double standards are so disgusting." Her words made me laugh. In fact, I genuinely laughed. I really didn't want to deal with someone who wasn't smart, especially not Sophia. Bella had once asked if I had thought of how to deal with Sophia. If I told anyone, they probably wouldn't believe me. I had never planned to scheme against her because as long as she was in the company, there would always be others making her uncomfortable. Her presence wouldn't cause me any pain. Aside from trying to gain some presence through Ethan, I had never regarded her as a rival. She simply wasn't qualified. I looked at her with a gentle gaze, as if observing a clown. "Sophia, don't say such foolish things in the future. Look at how agitated you are. I'm just reclaiming what's mine. You look like I've ripped your heart out. If I were you, I'd go home and advise your mum to come up with new strategies to win over the old man's heart. How pitiful. After all these years, you two have worked so hard to ingratiate. Yourselves with Alex only to end up with a meager allowance each month and no apartment to show for it. But don't worry, now that I'm in charge of the company, you and your mum's allowance won't be cut off. It should be considered your and your mum's hard-earned money for keeping the old man happy." Her complex changed from green to purple, and then to a pale white, as she thought of something else, and the corners of her mouth lifted in a smile, as if she had found a weapon to attack me with. "I may not be able to match you in an argument, but Emily, I'm not empty-handed either. The boyfriend you've loved for 8 years is still mine. I didn't even lift my eyelids. Trash belongs in the trash can. If he's yours, then he's yours. What's there to brag about? I thought Sophia had chosen Ethan because she liked him, but perhaps in her eyes, Ethan was the youngest manager in the company's leadership, and Alex favored him. She might believe that Ethan's future extended far beyond just being a departmental director. She needed to establish her footing in the company, and Ethan was her best ally. From one perspective, Ethan and Sophia were indeed quite suited for each other. They were both using each other, putting on a show only to end up with nothing and be thoroughly disappointed. The thought was amusing. After saying that, I truly felt annoyed. Maintaining my composure and looking at her gently, I said, "This is the last time I'll be kind to you, Sophia. I hope you get the hint and behave appropriately in the company. or I assure you I won't always be this patient." She looked like she was about to cry at my words, but unfortunately, I'm not Ethan and couldn't indulge her. I stood there smiling as I watched the tears glistening in her eyes, feeling inwardly pleased. Those tears were indeed a delightful sight. Ethan's resignation was expected. I really couldn't think of any reason he would give for leaving. All of his resignation procedures followed the normal process. I didn't inquire until everything was finalized on his last day at the company. For some reason, he sent me a message asking if we could talk. I didn't know what we would talk about. On the night Alex publicly acknowledged my identity, Ethan had also called me, saying he was waiting for me at the bottom of my building. Coincidentally, Alex had asked me to stay at the main house for a few days so we could sort out the company's interpersonal relationships. I didn't return to my own residence, nor did I reply to him. Eventually, he took the hint and stopped bothering me. This time, I wasn't sure if it was because it was a final farewell, but even though I hadn't replied, he still came looking for me. I'd always admired a certain calm and collected aura about him. Perhaps it was a characteristic shared by successful people, able to pretend as if those humiliating betrayals between us had never occurred. He remained so composed that I even doubted whether my memory had failed me. His brows and eyes were cold and stern, revealing little. L'émotion. Yet he wore a smile, as if we were old friends, and asked me at the door, "Shall we talk?" I remained silent as he stepped inside and handed me a cup of coffee. I took it, and we stood side by side in front of the huge Florida ceiling windows. The night sky was low, and the tall buildings rose dramatically, their lights dazzling. Looking out through the transparent glass felt like being in a galaxy filled with stars. I heard Ethan sigh beside me. "Do you remember when we first started working here?" That was nearly 5 years ago when we were two fresh graduates, standing by a similar high-rise window overlooking the lights outside. At that time, he joined with ambition, ready to make his mark, but was assigned the most inconspicuous menial tasks. Later, he landed a $1 million deal through his own efforts. I still remember how he held his painful stomach from drinking too much. Yet his pale face lit up with excitement as he looked at me, saying, "Emily, I'll give you a home in the city." That deal ended up becoming his boss's achievement, and he only received a bonus of 500 yuan. With that 500 yuan, he treated me to a hot pot meal. Sitting across from him in the steam rising from the pot, I couldn't see his expression clearly. I only remember his voice. That was the first and last time I saw a look of bewilderment on his face as he asked me, "Emily, when will we make something of ourselves?" After that meal, I went to find Alex. Since he divorced my mum, she hadn't seen him, let alone accessed his money or resources. Even if he had given me an unlimited credit card, my mom and I had never used it. That was the first time I asked him for help for Ethan. I still remember the surprise on Alex's face when he realized I was willing to ask for his assistance. He was undoubtedly pleased, but I also recall his pointed words. "Emily, in the business world, if you can't handle something like this and need my help, then he doesn't deserve to be my Hawthorne family's son-in-law." Though he said that, he did notice Ethan and praised him on some public occasions. His endorsement was a guiding light, and Ethan's career progressed naturally. He was smart and capable himself. I just didn't expect that, along this path of compliance, we had unknowingly drifted further apart. He was like a top scholar in ancient times, hoping to rise to greatness through the princess's favor. Perhaps that was his psychological definition of success. His tone, filled with nostalgia, wafted from the cracks of the past. "How did we become like this?" I scoffed. "Ethan, don't play the emotional card with me. I understand your previous actions of choosing the right tree to roost in, but now don't make me look down on you." He laughed too, turning his head to focus on me, not continuing his thought. After a while, the smile on his lips slowly faded, replaced with a serious expression. "Can't we even be ordinary friends anymore? Emily, I've betrayed you, and you've hidden things from me. Doesn't that mean we're even, Ethan? Do I sighed, looking back at him. Without any ripple of emotion, I don't know what you mean by even the even you speak of is based on my identity as Alex's daughter. Have you ever really thought about it? If I weren't Alex's daughter, what would my situation be now? I've watched you clandestinely interact with the chairman's daughter while under the pressure of your influence. I had no choice but to resign according to the non-compete agreement. I can't even work in the same industry. All my years of accumulation, my work, my struggles, have become stepping stones beneath you and Sophia's relationship. When I was wandering the streets feeling lost and desolate, I thought you and Sophia would be enjoying the best life in the skyscrapers downtown. Right, Ethan. Now tell me, are we even? How do you think we could ever be even? Finally, I looked at his pale, dazed face and smiled slightly, distant and indifferent. I politely said, Ethan, there's no such thing as being even. You owe me, and you will owe me for this lifetime. I'm not prepared to generously forgive you. From now on, dust to dust, and when we meet again, we'll merely be strangers. After saying that, I didn't waste any more time on meaningless chatter. I raised my hand to check the time and politely said, You should go now. Ethan's back was somewhat unsteady as he left. Over the years, I had rarely seen him in such a disheveled state, but this was the path he chose for himself. Later, at an industry summit, I encountered Ethan once or twice. By then, I had taken over Alex's position, basking in the spotlight wherever I went, while he stood on the outskirts of the crowd, slowly climbing back up from a new starting point in a new company. He didn't even have the right to speak to me. Later, while having dinner with Alex, I occasionally heard him mention Sophia, saying she had been cheated out of her money and love, lacking any sense. I didn't know when Ethan and Sophia had split up, but it was unsurprising that two people drawn together by mutual benefit would also part ways for the same reason. I held a teacup, gazing at the blooming garden filled with vibrant flowers in April. Spring was deep, and another year had already passed. The past had long since sailed over countless mountains.